The morning sun blazed over Naval Base Coronado, casting long shadows across the parade ground where 2,000 service members stood in formation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen could feel the weight of 2,000 pairs of eyes as she made her way through the crowd, her Navy SEAL trident pin gleaming on her uniform. The medal felt heavier today than usual, not from its physical weight, but from what it represented, a barrier she'd broken through fire, pain, and determination that most men couldn't fathom. Today was supposed to be a celebration. The annual Joint Forces Capability Demonstration brought together the best warriors from every branch: Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, Army Rangers, Air Force Pararescue, and Coast Guard Special Operations. It was a showcase of American military might, a chance for inter-service cooperation and mutual respect. Sarah had been selected to coordinate the SEAL portion of the demonstration, a distinct honor that recognized her expertise in close-quarters combat and tactical planning. She'd earned this position through 18 months of hell during basic underwater demolition SEAL training. She remembered every frozen night in the Pacific, every log carry that made her shoulders scream, every evolution designed to break the weak and forge the strong. Of the 180 candidates who started her Bud S class, only 19 graduated. She was the only woman. The instructors hadn't gone easy on her. If anything, they'd pushed harder, knowing that the teams demanded absolute excellence regardless of gender. But not everyone saw it that way. Master Chief Jake Brennan stood near the main command tent, a mountain of a man with 30 years in the Marine Corps, and a chest full of medals that told stories of battles from Fallujah to Helmand Province. His reputation preceded him: old school, hard-charging, and openly hostile to what he called the politically correct military. His square jaw and steel-gray buzz cut gave him the appearance of a man carved from granite, unmovable and uncompromising. As Sarah approached the coordination area, she heard his voice carrying across the compound. "Great, they're letting girls play soldier now," he muttered to a cluster of young Marines gathered around him. Their uncomfortable laughter rippled through the group. Some looked away, clearly embarrassed. Others smirked, feeding off their superiors' disdain. Sarah had heard it all before. During Bud S, she'd been called everything from diversity hire to far worse slurs that questioned her competence and character. She'd learned to let it roll off her back, to let her performance speak louder than her critics' words. Every obstacle she conquered, every mission she completed, every enemy she neutralized, these were her answers to the doubters. She walked past Brennan's group without acknowledging the comment, heading toward Commander Patricia Vasquez, the demonstration's overall coordinator. Vasquez, a helicopter pilot with 2 decades of service, greeted Sarah with a warm handshake and a knowing look that said she'd heard the comment too. "Don't let him get under your skin," Vasquez said quietly as they reviewed the day's schedule. "Men like Brennan are dinosaurs. They're dying out." "Not fast enough," Sarah replied with a tight smile. The morning briefing went smoothly despite the underlying tension. Representatives from each service branch presented their demonstration segments. The Army Rangers would showcase rapid deployment tactics. The Marine Raiders would perform an amphibious assault simulation. The Air Force PJs would demonstrate combat search and rescue. And Sarah's SEAL team would close the show with a hostage rescue scenario that would highlight their precision and lethality. Throughout the briefing, Sarah felt Brennan's eyes boring into her. Every time she spoke, he would shift in his seat, cross his arms, or let out an audible sigh. When she presented the SEAL demonstration timeline, he interrupted. "Question," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Have you actually been on a hostage rescue mission, Lieutenant? Or is this just theoretical for you?" The room went quiet. Commander Vasquez's jaw tightened. Sarah met Brennan's gaze steadily, her voice calm and professional. "I've participated in 7 direct action missions during my deployment to Afghanistan, Master Chief. 3 of those involved hostage or detainee recovery operations. All were successful with 0 friendly casualties." She paused, letting the facts sink in. Is there a specific tactical concern you'd like to address about the demonstration plan? Brennan's face reddened slightly, but he waved his hand dismissively. No, just making sure we're not putting on a show that doesn't reflect real-world capability. The implication was clear. He was questioning whether a woman could actually perform in combat. Sarah didn't take the bait. She simply nodded and continued her briefing. After the meeting concluded, the participants filtered out toward the pre-event reception in the base's main courtyard. Sarah walked with her SEAL teammates, Lieutenant Jake Morrison, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Doc Washington, and Petty Officer First Class Amy Rodriguez. They'd been through hell together, and their bond was forged in trust and shared hardship. "Want me to accidentally spill coffee on that marine dinosaur?" Rodriguez whispered with a grin. "Negative," Sarah replied. "We handle this professionally, always." But as they entered the crowded courtyard filled with service members from across the military, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the day was about to take a dark turn. Brennan was already there, holding court with his Marines, and his eyes tracked her every movement like a predator sizing up prey. The storm was gathering, and Sarah Chen was walking straight into it. The courtyard buzzed with energy as service members mingled under white canvas tents that provided shade from the relentless California sun. Tables laden with refreshments lined the perimeter, and the air filled with the sounds of military camaraderie, stories of deployments, good-natured inter-service rivalry, and shared experiences that transcended branch affiliations. For most of the assembled troops, this was exactly what the event was meant to be, a celebration of unity and excellence. But for Sarah Chen, the reception felt like navigating a minefield. She moved through the crowd with her teammates, shaking hands with fellow operators, discussing tactics with an Army Ranger captain, and sharing a laugh with a Coast Guard rescue swimmer about the differences between SEAL training and aviation survival technician school. Every conversation was professional, collegial, and respectful. This was her element, warriors recognizing warriors, rank and gender irrelevant in the face of proven capability. Then she felt his presence before she heard his voice. Master Chief Brennan had positioned himself near the main refreshment table, effectively controlling one of the courtyard's central gathering points. His voice carried with the practiced projection of a man who'd spent decades leading troops, but now he wielded that voice like a weapon aimed squarely at Sarah. "You know what's wrong with today's military," he announced to the dozen or so Marines and sailors gathered around him. His eyes locked onto Sarah as she approached the table to refill her water bottle. "Political correctness. We're so busy checking diversity boxes that we've forgotten what actually wins wars: strength, aggression, and warriors who can handle the real fight." Several of his audience members shifted uncomfortably. A young female Marine corporal looked down at her boots. A Navy lieutenant glanced at Sarah with an apologetic expression. But Brennan's core group of supporters nodded along, emboldened by their Master Chief's authority. Sarah kept her expression neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She dealt with men like Brennan her entire career, insecure individuals who felt threatened by change, who clung to outdated notions of what a warrior should look like. Her SEAL instructors had prepared her for this, teaching her that the best response to disrespect was excellence and composure. She reached for the water pitcher, filled her bottle, and turned to leave. "I'm talking about standards," Brennan continued, raising his voice to ensure Sarah heard every word. "Used to be that special operations meant something. Now they're lowering bars so everyone gets a participation trophy. Next thing you know, we'll be issuing pink berets." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through his audience. Sarah noticed Commander Vasquez across the courtyard, her face darkening as she started moving in their direction. Lieutenant Morrison stepped closer to Sarah, his hand subtly moving to her elbow in silent support. "Let it go," Morrison whispered. "He's trying to provoke you." Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly. She understood the game Brennan was playing. If she reacted emotionally, she'd confirm every stereotype he believed about women in combat roles. If she engaged him in front of an audience, she'd create a scene that would overshadow the demonstration and make her look unprofessional. The smart play was to walk away with her head high and let his words fall into the void they deserved. She took 3 steps toward the exit. "That's right, just walk away," Brennan called out, his voice dripping with mock surprise. "Can't handle a little straight talk. Maybe that's the problem right there." Sarah stopped. Every instinct screamed at her to keep walking, but something in his tone, the smug certainty that she wouldn't stand up for herself, made her pause. She turned slowly, her face a mask of professional calm. "Master Chief," she said, her voice clear and steady enough to cut through the courtyard noise. Conversations around them began to die down as people sensed confrontation brewing. "I'm not sure what your issue is, but I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your commentary professional. We're all here to support this demonstration." Brennan's face flushed red, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. He took 2 steps toward her, closing the distance until he was well inside her personal space. At 6'3", he towered over her 5'7" frame, using his physical presence as an intimidation tactic. "My issue," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "My issue is that I spent 30 years watching real warriors bleed and die for this country. I earned my place through combat, not through some social engineering experiment. You want respect. You don't demand it, sweetheart. You earn it." The word "sweetheart" landed like a slap. Around them, the courtyard had gone almost completely silent. Dozens of service members had stopped their conversations to watch the confrontation unfold. Sarah could see phones being discreetly pulled from pockets, cameras angling toward them. "I have earned it," Sarah replied, her voice never rising above professional level despite the fury building in her chest. "Through the same training, the same standards, and the same combat deployments as any SEAL. Now I'm asking you, as one professional to another, to step back and move on." For a moment, something flickered across Brennan's face, perhaps a recognition that he'd pushed too far, that the audience watching wasn't entirely sympathetic to his position. Several senior officers had moved closer, including Commander Vasquez and a Marine Corps colonel whose name tape read Martinez. But instead of de-escalating, Brennan's pride kicked in. He'd committed to this confrontation in front of his Marines, and backing down now would make him look weak. His jaw clenched, and his hands balled into fists at his sides. "You want to talk about respect," he hissed, leaning even closer. "When a Master Chief addresses you, Lieutenant, you stand there and take it. You don't mouth off. You don't disrespect 30 years of service. You sure as hell don't." "Master Chief Brennan," Commander Vasquez's voice cut through his tirade like a blade. She'd reached them, her face stern. "I think you need to take a walk and cool off." Brennan's head snapped toward Vasquez, and for a moment Sarah thought he might redirect his anger toward the commander. But then his eyes shifted back to Sarah, and she saw something dangerous there. A man whose authority had been challenged, whose worldview had been threatened, and who was about to make a catastrophic decision. "I'm not the one who needs to cool off," Brennan said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm just trying to have a conversation with this officer about military standards and respect." Sarah recognized the moment for what it was, a final off-ramp before something terrible happened. She could apologize, diffuse the situation, be the bigger person. Part of her wanted to, just to end the uncomfortable spectacle that was unfolding. But another part, the part that had endured every insult, every doubter, every person who'd told her she didn't belong, refused to back down from a bully. "This conversation is over, Master Chief," she said firmly. She turned her back on him, ready to walk away with Vasquez and end this confrontation before it spiraled further. That's when she felt his hand clamp down on her shoulder. The grip was hard, possessive, and crossed every line of professional conduct. Sarah began to turn back, her training already shifting into defensive mode. But before she could complete the movement, Brennan's other hand came around in a wide arc. His open palm cracked across her face, with a sound that echoed across the now-silent courtyard like a thunderclap. Time seemed to stop. Sarah's head snapped to the side from the impact, and she tasted blood instantly as her lips split against her teeth. The courtyard, filled with 2,000 troops just moments ago with conversation and laughter, fell into absolute silence. Master Chief Jake Brennan had just assaulted a Navy SEAL officer in front of hundreds of witnesses. And everyone saw it. The moment hung suspended in time like a photograph burned into the collective consciousness of everyone present. Sarah's head remained turned to the side, a thin line of blood trickling from her split lip down her chin. Her hand instinctively moved to her face, fingers coming away crimson. Master Chief Brennan stood frozen, his striking hand still raised in the air, his chest heaving with rage-fueled adrenaline. For one eternal second, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Sarah's eyes shifted back to Brennan, and what he saw there wasn't fear or shock or tears. It was the cold, calculated assessment of a trained warrior evaluating a threat. Her SEAL instructors had drilled it into her during hundreds of hours of combat training. Emotion is the enemy, clarity is survival, and hesitation gets you killed. Brennan seemed to realize his mistake in that frozen instant. His eyes widened slightly as the fog of rage cleared, and the reality of what he'd done crashed down on him. He just committed assault in front of hundreds of witnesses, including multiple senior officers. His career, his pension, his legacy, everything he'd built over 30 years, had just shattered with one impulsive strike. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. Not now, not with all these eyes watching. "You disrespectful," he started, raising his hand again as if to strike her a second time. He never got the chance. Sarah's training exploded into action with the fluid precision of a machine designed for violence. As Brennan's hand came forward, she sidestepped with the footwork of a boxer, creating an angle that took her off his center line. Her left hand shot up, intercepting his descending arm at the wrist. Her right hand gripped his elbow. In one seamless motion, she redirected his momentum, using his own force and body weight against him. Brennan's eyes went wide with shock as he suddenly found himself airborne, his feet leaving the ground as Sarah executed a perfect arm-drag takedown. For a man who weighed 230 pounds of muscle, the fall seemed to happen in slow motion. His body rotated horizontally, and then gravity took over. The impact of Brennan hitting the concrete courtyard echoed like a gunshot. The sound was sickening, 200 pounds of Marine Master Chief crashing face first into unforgiving pavement. The air exploded from his lungs with an audible oof, and his nose made a wet crunching sound that made several onlookers wince and turn away. Before Brennan could even process what had happened, Sarah was on him. Her knee pressed firmly into his spine, pinning him to the ground. She controlled his right arm with a joint lock that bordered on painful, his wrist twisted at an angle that made it impossible for him to move without risking a broken bone. Her other hand secured his left arm, neutralizing any possibility of resistance. The entire sequence, from his attempted second strike to his complete immobilization, had taken less than 3 seconds. "Don't move," Sarah commanded, her voice steady and professional despite the blood still dripping from her chin onto the concrete beside Brennan's face. The courtyard exploded into chaos. "Holy shit," someone yelled. "Did you see that? Get it on camera." Dozens of smartphones appeared, held high as service members captured the unprecedented scene. A Navy SEAL lieutenant had just taken down a Marine Master Chief in front of what seemed like half the military. The footage would be viral within hours, shared across base networks, social media, and encrypted messaging apps used by special operations communities worldwide. Some troops rushed forward, forming a circle around the scene. Others stood frozen in shock, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. A young Army private looked like he might be sick. A female Air Force captain had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and something that looked like vindication. Commander Vasquez was already in motion, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. "Everyone back, give them space, now." Two military police officers who'd been stationed at the courtyard entrance sprinted toward the scene, their boots pounding against the concrete. Petty Officer Rodriguez and Lieutenant Morrison moved to Sarah's sides, ready to support her but letting her maintain control of the situation. Beneath Sarah's knee, Brennan groaned, trying to shift his weight. Sarah applied slightly more pressure to the joint lock, and he immediately stopped moving, gasping in pain. "I said don't move, Master Chief," Sarah repeated, her voice carrying absolute authority. "The military police are coming. You're going to remain exactly where you are until they take custody of you. Do you understand?" Brennan said nothing, his face pressed against the concrete, blood from his broken nose pooling beneath him. "Master Chief Brennan, I asked if you understand," Sarah said again, adding just enough pressure to the joint lock to emphasize her point. "Yes," Brennan finally gasped, his voice muffled and thick with blood and humiliation. The two MPs reached them, both looking uncertain about the scene before them, a female lieutenant holding down a male master chief twice her size. The senior MP, a seasoned staff sergeant named Williams, had witnessed the entire confrontation from his post near the entrance. "Lieutenant Chen, we've got him," Williams said, his voice respectful. "You can release him to our custody." Sarah maintained her position for one more moment, ensuring Brennan was completely subdued, then smoothly disengaged, stepping back as the MPs moved in. Williams and his partner hauled Brennan to his feet, immediately placing him in handcuffs. Brennan's face was a mess, his nose clearly broken, blood streaming down his face, bits of concrete embedded in his cheek, but the physical damage was nothing compared to the destruction of his dignity. His eyes, when they met Sarah's, held a mixture of rage, humiliation, and the dawning realization of how completely his life had just fallen apart. "Master Chief Jake Brennan, you're under arrest for assault on a fellow service member," Williams announced in a loud, clear voice that carried across the courtyard. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court-martial proceeding." As Williams continued reading Brennan his rights, Commander Vasquez appeared at Sarah's side, gently taking her arm. "Sarah, we need to get you to medical right now. That's an order." Sarah nodded, suddenly aware that her adrenaline was beginning to fade and her face was throbbing where Brennan had struck her. She touched her lip again, still bleeding, probably needing stitches. Around them, the crowd began to process what they'd witnessed. The reactions were mixed. Some of Brennan's Marines looked stunned and ashamed, realizing their mentor had just destroyed himself. Others, particularly the female service members present, had expressions of grim satisfaction. A barrier had been broken, a line had been crossed, and justice had been swift in public. As the MPs led Brennan away in handcuffs, his dress uniform now stained with blood and dirt, a strange quiet settled over the courtyard. 2,000 troops had assembled for a demonstration of military capability. They'd gotten one, just not the kind anyone had expected. Marine Corps Colonel Martinez stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. "All right, everyone, show's over. Return to your assigned areas. Anyone who witnessed this incident, report to the MP station for statements. Move." The crowd began to disperse, but the buzz of conversation was deafening. The story was already spreading, texts flying, calls being made. Within minutes, every corner of Naval Base Coronado would know what happened. Within hours, the entire military would be talking about it. Sarah let Vasquez guide her toward the medical facility, Morrison and Rodriguez flanking them like protective shadows. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, hear the whispered conversations. "Did you see how fast she moved?" took him down like he was nothing. About damn time someone put Brennan in his place. That's a Navy SEAL for you. As they walked, Sarah's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be investigations, statements, possibly a court-martial. Her actions would be scrutinized, questioned, analyzed. But she'd done everything by the book. She'd tried to de-escalate. She'd attempted to walk away. She'd only used force after being assaulted, and she'd used the minimum necessary to control the threat. Still, she knew how the system could work. Brennan had allies, connections, 3 decades of service. Would they try to protect him? Would they find a way to turn this around on her? Commander Vasquez seemed to read her thoughts. "Sarah, listen to me," she said quietly as they walked. "What happened back there was witnessed by hundreds of people. The security cameras caught everything. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You defended yourself appropriately and you maintained control. Brennan is finished. His career is over. You understand that, right?" Sarah nodded, but uncertainty still gnawed at her. She'd seen good people get railroaded before, seen the old boys network close ranks to protect their own. But as they entered the medical facility and the corpsman began examining her injuries, Sarah Chen made herself a promise. She would not be silent. She would not back down. She would not let this be swept under the rug. Master Chief Brennan had made his choice when he raised his hand against her. Now he would face the consequences. Base Commander Captain Rebecca Torres was reviewing operational reports in her office when her phone erupted with simultaneous calls, texts, and emergency notifications. Her executive officer burst through the door without knocking, his face flushed and urgent. "Ma'am, we have a situation in the courtyard. You need to come now." Torres was already on her feet, her command instincts kicking into high gear. What kind of situation? Assault. A Marine Master Chief struck a Navy SEAL lieutenant in front of approximately 200 witnesses. Torres' blood ran cold. "Which SEAL?" "Lieutenant Sarah Chen, ma'am." Torres moved like lightning, her executive officer struggling to keep pace as she strode through the headquarters building toward the courtyard. Her mind raced through protocols, regulations, and the immediate implications. An assault on federal property between service members of different branches during an official event. This was a powder keg that could explode into an inter-service incident, a media nightmare, and a stain on every principle the military claimed to uphold. As she emerged into the courtyard, the scene before her told the complete story in a single glance. Master Chief Brennan, his face bloodied and his uniform disheveled, stood in handcuffs between 2 military police officers. Lieutenant Chen was being escorted toward the medical facility by Commander Vasquez, blood visible on her face. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, service members held phones aloft, capturing every moment. Torres' jaw tightened. This was already public. Within hours, this footage would be on every social media platform, every military forum, every news outlet that covered defense issues. There would be no containing it, no quiet resolution behind closed doors. Whatever happened next would play out under the harsh light of public scrutiny. She approached the MPs first, her voice carrying the absolute authority of a commanding officer who'd spent 26 years leading sailors through calm seas and combat zones alike. "Staff Sergeant Williams, report." Williams snapped to attention as best he could while maintaining control of his prisoner. "Ma'am, at approximately 13:47 hours, I personally witnessed Master Chief Brennan strike Lieutenant Chen with an open hand across her face. The assault was unprovoked. Lieutenant Chen had attempted to disengage from the confrontation. Master Chief Brennan grabbed her shoulder and struck her. When he attempted to strike her again, Lieutenant Chen defended herself with appropriate force and restrained the suspect until we could take custody. Torres turned her gaze to Brennan, studying him with the cold assessment of a commander evaluating a critical failure. His nose was clearly broken, blood staining his dress uniform. But beyond the physical damage, she saw something else, a man whose entire identity was crumbling in real time. 30 years of service, and it had come to this. "Master Chief Brennan," Tors said, her voice cold as Arctic ice. "You are confined to the brig pending investigation and formal charges. You will have no contact with Lieutenant Chen or any witnesses. You will surrender your credentials, your weapon if you're carrying one, and any electronic devices. Do you understand?" Brennan's jaw worked, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and desperation. For a moment, Tors thought he might try to argue, to justify, to explain. Instead, he simply nodded, the fight draining out of him as the reality of his situation fully registered. "Take him," Tors ordered the MPs. As they led Brennan away, she turned to the crowd that had gathered. Her voice rang out across the courtyard with the practiced projection of someone who'd commanded ships and hundreds of personnel. "Listen up. What you witnessed here today was a serious violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There will be a full investigation. Anyone who witnessed any part of this incident will report to the MP station within the next 2 hours to provide a statement. This is not optional, this is an order. Security footage will be reviewed. This will be handled by the book, completely and thoroughly. Am I clear?" A chorus of "Yes, ma'am" echoed across the courtyard. Tors continued, her eyes scanning the assembled troops. "I also want to make something absolutely clear to everyone here. This command has zero tolerance. Let me repeat that, zero tolerance for assault, harassment, or discrimination of any kind. It doesn't matter what rank you hold, how many years you've served, or what medals you've earned. If you raise your hand against a fellow service member, if you create a hostile environment, if you violate the standards we've all sworn to uphold, you will face the full consequences of your actions. What happened here today is exactly what should happen: immediate intervention, immediate accountability, and the full weight of military justice." She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the courtyard, she saw nods of agreement, particularly from the female service members present. But she also saw some uncomfortable shuffling from a few of Brennan's supporters, men who were perhaps reassessing their own attitudes and behaviors. "Now, as the base commander ordered, disperse and return to your duties. Those who witnessed the incident, report to the MPs. Everyone else, we still have a demonstration to prepare for, though it will likely be rescheduled. Move out." The crowd began to break up, conversations buzzing like disturbed hornets. Tors made her way quickly to the medical facility, where she found Lieutenant Chen sitting on an examination table while a Navy corpsman carefully cleaned the cut on her lip. Commander Vasquez stood nearby, along with Chen's SEAL teammates. When Tors entered, everyone snapped to attention. "At ease," Tors said immediately. She approached Sarah, studying the young lieutenant with a mixture of concern and professional assessment. The split lip was swelling, and bruising was already forming along her jawline where Brennan's hand had connected. "Lieutenant Chen, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, ma'am," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the obvious pain. "It looks worse than it is." The corpsman, a seasoned petty officer named Jackson, glanced at Tors. "She'll need 3 stitches for the lip, ma'am. There's soft tissue swelling and bruising, but no fractures, no concussion. I'm documenting everything photographically for the investigation." "Good," Tors said. She turned her full attention to Sarah. "Lieutenant, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." Sarah recounted the entire incident with the precise recall of someone trained to observe and report under pressure. She described Brennan's initial comments during the morning briefing, his escalating harassment at the reception, her attempts to disengage professionally, his physical contact, the strike, and her defensive response. Her account was factual, unemotional, and devastatingly clear. Tors listened without interruption, her experienced mind already assembling the case. When Sarah finished, Tors nodded slowly. "Lieutenant, you did everything correctly. You attempted to de-escalate. You tried to walk away. You only used force after being assaulted, and you used the minimum necessary to control the threat and protect yourself. Your actions were textbook appropriate self-defense. Do you understand that?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah said, though Torres could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The young lieutenant was clearly worried about potential repercussions, about how the system might treat her despite being the victim. Tor's voice softened slightly, though it lost none of its authority. "Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you. What happened today is going to generate a lot of attention. The footage is already spreading, there's no way to contain it. You're going to be scrutinized, questioned, and probably featured in news stories you never asked for. But I want you to know something. I've got your back, this command has got your back, and the evidence is overwhelming. Master Chief Brennan assaulted you. He's finished. His career is over. And if anyone tries to spin this any other way, they'll have to go through me first." The relief that washed over Sarah's face was palpable. Morrison and Rodriguez visibly relaxed as well. Commander Vasquez nodded approvingly. "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah said quietly. Torres straightened, her command persona fully engaged. "Here's what happens next. I'm contacting NCIS immediately to take lead on the investigation. This crosses inter-service lines, so we need federal investigators to ensure everything is above board. You'll give a formal statement to them. I'm also notifying Brennan's commanding officer at Camp Pendleton. They'll want to send a representative. The Judge Advocate General's office will be involved to determine charges and court-martial proceedings. And I'm personally calling the Public Affairs Office to get ahead of the media storm that's about to hit." She pulled out her phone, already scrolling through contacts. "The joint demonstration is postponed indefinitely. Right now, the priority is this investigation and making sure justice is served properly. Lieutenant, you're on administrative leave pending the investigation's conclusion. That's standard procedure, not a punishment. You'll remain available for interviews and statements, but you're relieved of duty responsibilities until this is resolved. Understood?" "Understood, ma'am." Torres looked at Morrison and Rodriguez. "You two stay with her. Make sure she gets whatever she needs. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to contact her about this incident outside of official channels, you report it to me immediately." "Yes, ma'am," they responded in unison. As Torres turned to leave, Sarah spoke up. "Captain Torres." Torres paused, looking back. "What happens to the troops who came here for the demonstration? All those people who traveled here, the resources that went into planning this?" Torres allowed herself a small, grim smile. Despite being assaulted, despite the trauma and uncertainty, Lieutenant Chen was still thinking about the mission and the people under her care. That was the mark of a true leader. "They'll be taken care of, Lieutenant. Right now, you take care of yourself. That's an order." As Torres strode out of the medical facility, her phone was already pressed to her ear. "Get me NCIS Special Agent Marcus Webb. Tell him we have a priority case that needs immediate attention." Within 30 minutes, the full machinery of military justice was in motion. NCIS agents were en route. The Judge Advocate General's office was being briefed. Brennan sat alone in a cell, his career in ruins. And across social media, the footage was already going viral, a powerful symbol of accountability, consequences, and the changing face of the American military. The reckoning had begun. NCIS Special Agent Marcus Webb arrived at Naval Base Coronado exactly 47 minutes after Captain Torres' call. A 15-year veteran of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, Webb had worked everything from fraud cases to murder investigations. But something about this case already felt different. As he drove through the base gates, his phone buzzed continuously with messages from colleagues who'd already seen the viral footage. "You seeing this, Marcus?" One text read, accompanied by a video link. "SEAL takes down Marine MC. It's everywhere." Webb didn't need to watch the videos. He'd already seen 3 different angles before leaving his San Diego office. What struck him most wasn't the physical confrontation itself, but the clarity of the evidence. In his experience, Most assault cases devolved into he said she said credibility battles. This one had hundreds of witnesses and multiple high-definition recordings from every conceivable angle. Captain Torres met him personally at the headquarters building, her face set in grim determination. "Agent Webb, thank you for getting here so quickly." "Ma'am, given what's already circulating online, I'd say time is of the essence." Webb pulled out his tablet, opening a fresh case file. "I need full access to all witnesses, security footage, medical records, and the suspect. And I need to interview Lieutenant Chen as soon as she's medically cleared." "You'll have everything," Torres assured him. "This investigation will have my complete cooperation and transparency. No obstacles, no interference." Webb nodded approvingly. In his career, he'd encountered commanders who tried to protect their own, who viewed investigators as threats rather than allies in maintaining good order and discipline. Torres clearly wasn't one of them. His first stop was the brig, where Master Chief Brennan sat in a holding cell, his broken nose bandaged, his eyes hollow. The confident, aggressive man from the courtyard footage had been replaced by someone who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. Webb settled into the interview room, placing his recorder on the table between them. "Master Chief Brennan, I'm Special Agent Marcus Webb, NCIS. You've been read your rights. Do you understand them?" "Yes." Brennan's voice was thick. Whether from his broken nose or emotion, Webb couldn't tell. "Do you wish to waive those rights and speak with me?" Brennan hesitated, then nodded. "I want to explain what happened." "Please do." What followed was a masterclass in self-justification and blame-shifting. According to Brennan's account, Lieutenant Chen had been disrespectful and provocative. He claimed she'd gotten in his face, and that he'd only meant to get her attention with what he called a corrective tap. The second attempted strike. He denied it entirely, claiming Chen had overreacted and assaulted him without cause. Webb took notes without expression, letting Brennan talk himself deeper into a hole. Every word out of the Master Chief's mouth contradicted what Webb had already seen on video, footage that showed Chen trying to walk away, Brennan grabbing her, delivering a full-force slap, then attempting to strike her again. "Master Chief, you're aware there's security camera footage of this entire incident." Brennan's face went pale. "The cameras, they don't show the whole context. They don't show her disrespect, her attitude. They show you striking a fellow officer unprovoked," Webb interrupted flatly. "They show her attempting to disengage. They show you grabbing her and hitting her. And they show you trying to hit her again before she defended herself." Brennan's jaw clenched. "That's not. I mean, technically, yes, but you don't understand the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that you committed assault, Master Chief, on federal property in front of hundreds of witnesses against a Navy SEAL officer." Webb leaned forward slightly. "Help me understand something. You've served 30 years with distinction. You've led Marines in combat. What made you throw it all away?" For the first time, Brennan's composure cracked completely. His eyes reddened, his hands trembled. "She doesn't belong there," he said, his voice breaking. "Women don't belong in special operations. I've seen good men die, real warriors, and now we're putting girls in the teams because of politics. It's wrong. Somebody needed to say it. So you decided to assault her to make your point." "I didn't." Brennan stopped himself, realizing he was about to contradict his own statement. "I lost my temper. I made a mistake." Webb sat back, his face impassive. In his years as an investigator, he'd heard every excuse imaginable. But there was something particularly pathetic about watching a 30-year career self-destruct over prejudice and pride. "We're done here for now," Webb said, gathering his materials. "I'll be recommending formal charges to the JAG office. Expect to remain in custody pending court-martial proceedings." As he left the brig, Webb's phone rang. It was his partner, Special Agent Lisa Chen. No relation to the victim, though the coincidence wasn't lost on Webb. "Marcus, you need to see what I found," Lisa said, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "I've been digging into Brennan's service record. This isn't his first incident." Webb's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean there are 3 prior complaints against him from female Marines over the past 6 years. Harassment, hostile work environment, inappropriate comments. All of them were filed, investigated by his chain of command, and somehow buried or dismissed with minimal consequences. The women who filed, 2 transferred out of his unit shortly after. 1 left the Marine Corps entirely." Webb felt his jaw tighten. This was bigger than a single assault. This was a pattern of misconduct that had been ignored, enabling Brennan to continue his behavior until it finally escalated to violence. "Get me copies of all those complaint files, every investigation report, and contact information for those women. If they're willing to testify, their testimony establishes a clear pattern of gender-based harassment and hostility." "Already on it," Lisa confirmed. "Marcus, this guy should have been stopped years ago. Someone in his chain of command protected him." "Then we're going to find out who and why," Webb said grimly. "This investigation just got a lot bigger." Over the next 72 hours, Webb and his team conducted 47 witness interviews. The picture that emerged was damning and consistent. Multiple service members reported Brennan's pattern of hostile comments about women in the military throughout the morning briefing and reception. Several testified they'd heard him specifically targeting Lieutenant Chen with increasingly aggressive rhetoric. Commander Patricia Vasquez provided crucial testimony about her attempts to intervene before the assault occurred. "I was moving toward them to separate them when he struck her," Vasquez stated on record. There was no ambiguity. Lieutenant Chen was walking away. Master Chief Brennan grabbed her and hit her deliberately and forcefully. Staff Sergeant Williams, the MP who'd witnessed everything, provided perhaps the most damning account. "I've been an MP for 12 years, sir. I know the difference between a corrective tap and an assault. That was an assault. Full force, open hand across her face. And when she turned around, he was winding up to hit her again. If Lieutenant Chen hadn't defended herself, he would have struck her multiple times." The security footage confirmed every detail. Webb obtained recordings from 4 different cameras covering the courtyard. The main camera provided a perfect wide angle showing the entire confrontation from beginning to end. The timestamp showed the complete sequence. Chen attempting to walk away at 13:47:23, Brennan grabbing her at 13:47:25, the strike at 13:47:26, his attempted second strike at 13:47:27, and Chen's defensive takedown at 13:47:28. Webb watched the footage dozens of times, analyzing every frame. What struck him most was Chen's restraint. Even after being assaulted, even with legal justification to use more force, she'd employed the minimum necessary to control the threat. She'd taken Brennan down, secured him, and held him for law enforcement, textbook appropriate self-defense. The medical evidence was equally clear. Navy Corpsman Jackson had photographed Chen's injuries from multiple angles, the split lip requiring 3 stitches, the bruising along her jawline consistent with an open-hand strike, the minor abrasions on her shoulder where Brennan had grabbed her. Jackson's report noted that injuries are consistent with patient's account of being struck forcefully across the face with an open hand. Brennan's injuries, broken nose, facial abrasions, bruised ribs, were all consistent with his face-first impact with the concrete and Chen's restraint hold. Nothing excessive, nothing punitive, just control. By the end of the 3rd day, Webb had compiled a case file that was essentially airtight. He sat in Captain Torr's office, presenting his findings. "Ma'am, based on my investigation, I'm recommending the following charges against Master Chief Brennan. Article 128, assault. Article 134, conduct unbecoming, and Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation, specifically regarding equal opportunity and anti-harassment policies." The evidence is overwhelming. We have video, witnesses, medical documentation, and his own contradictory statements. Additionally, the pattern of prior complaints suggests this should be treated as aggravated assault with prejudice-based motivation. Torres nodded slowly. "What's your assessment of Lieutenant Chen's actions?" "Completely justified self-defense," Webb said without hesitation. "She attempted to de-escalate. She tried to disengage. She only used force after being assaulted, and she used the minimum necessary. Her conduct was exemplary under extremely trying circumstances. I see no basis for any charges or even administrative action against her." "Good," Torres said, "because neither do I. What's the timeline for court-martial?" "JAG is already preparing the charge sheet. Given the high-profile nature and clear evidence, I'd expect special court-martial proceedings to begin within 3 to 4 weeks. This one's going to move fast, ma'am." Torres stood, extending her hand. "Thank you, Agent Webb. Your thoroughness and professionalism are exactly what this case needed." As Webb left the base that evening, his phone buzzed with a news alert. The story had broken nationally. Navy SEAL assaulted by Marine Master Chief. Viral video sparks military justice debate. The footage was playing on cable news, with retired military officers and legal experts weighing in. Webb knew what came next would be intense. Media scrutiny, public pressure, and the weight of military justice bearing down on one man who destroyed his own career in a moment of prejudice and rage. But justice, Webb thought as he drove home, wasn't always swift. Sometimes it took years of ignored complaints and protected misconduct. But when it finally came, when the evidence was this clear and the will to pursue it was this strong, justice was inevitable. Master Chief Brennan was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 3 weeks and 2 days after the assault, the Special Court-Martial of United States v. Master Chief Jake Brennan convened in a military courtroom at Naval Base San Diego. The decision to move the proceedings off Coronado was deliberate. Captain Torres and the convening authority wanted to avoid any appearance of home field advantage, ensuring the trial's integrity remained beyond reproach. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Every seat in the gallery held a service member who'd requested permission to attend. The waiting list had exceeded 200 names. Military attorneys, JAG officers observing for educational purposes, senior enlisted leaders, and junior officers filled every available space. The gender split was notable. Roughly 60% of the gallery was female, many wearing the insignia of combat units, special operations, and frontline billets that had only recently opened to women. Outside, media vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Reporters from every major news network stood ready with cameras and microphones. The story had captured national attention, becoming a flashpoint in ongoing debates about women in combat, military culture, and accountability for misconduct. Major Sandra Reeves, the lead prosecutor from the Judge Advocate General's Corps, sat at the government's table reviewing her notes one final time. A 12-year veteran of military law with a conviction rate that bordered on legendary, Reeves had personally requested this case. She'd seen too many incidents of harassment and assault swept under the rug, too many women forced out of service rather than see justice done. Not this time. Across the aisle, Brennan sat beside his defense attorney, a graying civilian lawyer named Robert Hutchinson who specialized in military defense cases. Hutchinson had built his reputation on getting reduced sentences for service members accused of serious crimes, but even he knew this case was different. The evidence was overwhelming, the publicity intense, and his client had essentially confessed during the NCIS interview. Their strategy would be mitigation. Portray Brennan as a dedicated warrior who'd snapped under stress, argue for leniency based on 3 decades of otherwise honorable service, and hope for a sentence that might preserve some fragment of his pension. Brennan himself looked like a shadow of the imposing figure he'd been just 3 weeks earlier. His dress blue uniform, which had once showcased rows of ribbons and medals earned across multiple deployments, now seemed to hang on him. The bandage was gone from his nose, but the break had left it slightly crooked. His eyes were hollow, ringed with dark circles from sleepless nights in the brig. The military judge, Captain Alan Morrison, no relation to Sarah's teammate, entered the courtroom. Everyone rose as he took the bench. Morrison was known as a fair but strict jurist who ran his courtroom with precision and had zero tolerance for theatrics. "This court-martial is called to order," Morrison announced. "We are convened to try Master Chief Jake Brennan, United States Marine Corps, on charges of assault under Article 128, conduct unbecoming under Article 134, and violation of lawful general regulation under Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Major Reeves, is the government ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Reeves stood, her voice clear and confident. "Mr. Hutchinson, is the defense ready?" "We are, Your Honor," Hutchinson replied, though his tone carried less conviction. The military jury, a panel of 5 officers and 3 senior enlisted members, carefully selected to represent different branches and backgrounds, sat in their designated area, their faces professionally neutral. Major Reeves delivered her opening statement with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. "Members of the jury, the evidence you will see in this case is as clear as it is disturbing. On October 15th, in full view of hundreds of witnesses and multiple security cameras, Master Chief Brennan committed an unprovoked assault against Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a decorated Navy SEAL officer. He struck her with sufficient force to split her lip and cause visible bruising. When she defended herself appropriately, he attempted to strike her again. This was not a moment of confusion. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act of violence committed by a senior enlisted leader against a junior officer, motivated by his openly expressed belief that women do not belong in combat specialties." She paused, letting her words settle over the courtroom. "The defense may attempt to portray Master Chief Brennan as a dedicated warrior who simply lost his temper, but the evidence will show a pattern of harassment, discriminatory conduct, and escalating hostility that culminated in violence. You will hear from eyewitnesses who tried to intervene. You will see security footage that captures every moment of the assault in crystal clear detail. You will hear from NCIS investigators who uncovered a history of similar complaints that were ignored or buried. And you will hear from Lieutenant Chen herself, who will describe what it means to serve your country with distinction, only to be assaulted by a fellow service member simply for being a woman in uniform." Reeves returned to her table, her opening statement complete. Hutchinson rose for the defense, his approach noticeably more subdued. "Members of the jury, what happened on October 15th was wrong. My client knows it was wrong. He has expressed deep remorse for his actions. But I ask you to consider the full context of a man who has given 30 years of his life to defending this nation. Master Chief Brennan served multiple combat tours, led Marines through some of the most dangerous missions our country has undertaken, and earned the respect of his peers through decades of honorable service. On that day, under stress and facing what he perceived as disrespect to military standards he'd fought to uphold, he made a terrible mistake. A single moment that does not define 3 decades of dedication." Even as Hutchinson spoke, several jury members exchanged glances. The single moment argument rang hollow when weighed against video evidence of deliberate violence. The prosecution's case unfolded with devastating efficiency. Major Reeves called witness after witness, building an irrefutable narrative. Commander Patricia Vasquez testified about Brennan's pattern of hostile comments throughout the day. He made it clear he believed women had no place in special operations. His language was openly dismissive and derogatory. "I was moving to intervene when the assault occurred." Staff Sergeant Williams, the MP, described exactly what he'd witnessed. Lieutenant Chen was walking away. Master Chief Brennan grabbed her shoulder, spun her around, and struck her across the face with an open hand. The sound carried across the courtyard. When she turned back toward him, he was clearly preparing to hit her again. Her defensive action likely prevented a more severe assault. Agent Webb presented the NCIS investigation findings, including the security footage. The courtroom fell silent as the video played on multiple monitors. The imagery was stark and undeniable, Chen attempting to disengage, Brennan pursuing, the grab, the strike, the attempted second blow, and Chen's controlled defensive response. When the video ended, several jury members sat back heavily in their chairs. One female Army major had tears in her eyes. Webb continued. The investigation also uncovered 3 prior complaints against Master Chief Brennan from female Marines between 2019 and 2024. All involved allegations of harassment, hostile work environment, and discriminatory treatment. All were investigated at the unit level and either dismissed or resulted in minor administrative actions. 2 of the 3 complainants transferred out of his unit. 1 left military service entirely. Hutchinson objected. Your Honor, those prior complaints were investigated and resolved. They're not relevant to the current charges. They establish pattern and motive, Your Honor, Reeves countered. They show this was not an isolated incident, but rather an escalation of long-standing discriminatory attitudes. Overruled, Judge Morrison said. The evidence is admissible to show pattern, motive, and state of mind. Proceed, Major Reeves. The medical evidence came next. Navy Corpsman Jackson presented the photographs of Sarah's injuries, explaining each one in clinical detail. The split lip required 3 stitches. The bruising pattern is consistent with an open-hand strike delivered with significant force. The injury to the shoulder shows grip marks consistent with being grabbed forcefully. On the 3rd day of trial, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. Major Reeves called her final witness. The government calls Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen. Sarah had been promoted just days before the trial, a promotion that had been in the works long before the assault but whose timing carried symbolic weight. She entered the courtroom in her service dress blues, the seal trident prominent on her chest, walking with quiet confidence to the witness stand. After being sworn in, she settled into the witness chair, her posture perfect, her gaze steady. Major Reeves approached. Lieutenant Commander Chen, please tell the court about your military service. Sarah's voice was clear and composed. I enlisted in the Navy 8 years ago. After completing basic training and serving as a hospital corpsman, I applied for BUD-S, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. I graduated with Class 347, one of 19 graduates from a starting class of 180 candidates. Following SEAL qualification training, I served with SEAL Team 7, deploying to Afghanistan for 7 months where I participated in direct action missions, hostage rescue operations, and intelligence gathering. And on October 15th, you were at Naval Base Coronado for what purpose? I was coordinating the SEAL demonstration component of the Joint Forces Capability Demonstration, ma'am. Reeves walked Sarah through the entire day. Brennan's comments during the morning briefing, his escalating harassment at the reception, her attempts to remain professional and disengage. When Master Chief Brennan struck you, what went through your mind? Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. Initially, shock. Despite his hostile comments, I never expected a senior enlisted leader to commit assault in full view of hundreds of service members. Then my training took over. I assessed the threat, recognized he was preparing to strike again, and responded with appropriate defensive force to protect myself and control the situation. Did you at any point provoke or instigate this confrontation? No, ma'am. I attempted multiple times to disengage and walk away. I maintained professional bearing throughout. Hutchinson's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. He tried to suggest Sarah had been disrespectful, but she calmly refuted each suggestion with specific facts. He attempted to portray her defensive action as excessive, but Sarah walked through her SEAL training and explained why the technique she'd used was actually the minimal force option available. Master Chief Brennan outweighed me by approximately 80 pounds and had a significant height and reach advantage, Sarah explained. When someone of that size is attempting to strike you repeatedly, you neutralize the threat as quickly and efficiently as possible. I used a basic arm drag takedown and control hold, techniques taught to every law enforcement officer and security professional precisely because they're effective without causing serious injury. When Hutchinson sat down, he looked deflated. There was simply no way to make Sarah appear at fault. The trial concluded on the fourth day with closing arguments. Major Reeves was brief and pointed. The evidence is clear. The defendant committed assault. He did so deliberately, in front of hundreds of witnesses, motivated by discriminatory animus. Lieutenant Commander Chen did everything right. She tried to walk away, she defended herself appropriately, and she maintained her professionalism throughout. The only question before you is whether we as a military will tolerate this conduct. The answer must be no. The jury deliberated for 93 minutes. When they returned, the foreman, a Marine Corps colonel, stood to deliver the verdict. On the charge of assault, guilty. Brennan's head dropped. On the charge of conduct unbecoming, guilty. His hands began to shake. On the charge of violation of lawful general regulation, guilty. The courtroom remained silent as Judge Morrison asked, "Does the defendant wish to present matters in extenuation and mitigation before sentencing?" Hutchinson stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We call Master Chief Brennan." Master Chief Jake Brennan walked to the witness stand with the heavy, shuffling gait of a man approaching his own execution. The confident swagger that had defined his 3 decades of service had vanished, replaced by the broken posture of someone watching their entire life collapse in real time. He settled into the chair, refusing to make eye contact with anyone in the courtroom, his gaze fixed somewhere on the floor between his feet and the judge's bench. His defense attorney, Robert Hutchinson, approached with documents in hand, letters of recommendation from former commanding officers, deployment records, commendations, and photographs of Brennan with his Marines in combat zones from Fallujah to Helmand Province. "Master Chief Brennan," Hutchinson began, his voice carefully modulated to convey both respect and sympathy, "you've heard the jury's verdict. Before the court determines your sentence, I'd like to give you the opportunity to address what happened and to speak about your service to this nation." Brennan's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke, his voice hoarse and barely audible. "I served this country for 30 years. 30 years. He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "I've led Marines through firefights. I've written letters to parents whose sons didn't come home. I've bled for this uniform, lost friends for this flag, and given everything I had to the Corps." He paused, swallowing hard, "and I threw it all away in one moment of stupidity, of pride, of being unable to accept that the world had changed and I needed to change with it." Hutchinson gestured toward the stack of character letters. "Your Honor, we have 17 letters of support from officers and enlisted Marines who served under Master Chief Brennan's leadership. They describe a dedicated warrior, a mentor, a leader who inspired courage and maintained discipline under the most challenging circumstances." Judge Morrison nodded. "The court will review those letters. Master Chief Brennan, do you wish to say anything directly to Lieutenant Commander Chen?" For the first time since taking the stand, Brennan looked toward Sarah, who sat in the front row of the gallery between her SEAL teammates. Their eyes met, and something profound passed between them, not forgiveness, but perhaps a mutual recognition of the human cost of this moment. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," Brennan said, his voice cracking, "what I did was inexcusable. You earned your place through the same hell that forges every SEAL. You proved yourself in combat. You conducted yourself with more professionalism and restraint than I did, and you showed more honor in that courtyard than I did in my entire career." He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. "I let my prejudices, my outdated beliefs, my inability to see past my own ego destroy everything I built. You deserved better. Every woman who serves deserves better. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, but I am deeply, truly sorry." Sarah's face remained composed, though Lieutenant Morrison beside her squeezed her shoulder in quiet support. She gave the slightest nod of acknowledgement, not acceptance, not forgiveness, just recognition that Brennan had spoken. Hutchinson presented the mitigation case for the next 40 minutes, highlighting Brennan's combat medals, his mentorship of young Marines, his perfect service record prior to this incident. "Your Honor, members of the sentencing panel, I ask you to consider that one terrible moment does not erase 3 decades of honorable service. Master Chief Brennan has already lost his reputation, his standing in the community he dedicated his life to, and the respect of his peers. I ask for a sentence that acknowledges both the severity of his crime and the totality of his service." Major Reeves stood for the government's sentencing recommendation, her expression severe. "Your Honor, the defendant would have you believe this was one isolated moment. The evidence shows otherwise. This was the culmination of years of harassment, discrimination, and hostility that his chain of command failed to address. 3 women filed complaints. 3 women were ignored or intimidated into silence. How many others never came forward at all?" She walked toward the jury panel, her voice gaining intensity. "Master Chief Brennan didn't just assault Lieutenant Commander Chen. He assaulted every principle we claim to stand for: good order and discipline, equal opportunity, and the fundamental dignity that every service member deserves. His previous good service cannot excuse what he did, cannot undo the injury he caused, and cannot erase the message his actions sent to every woman in uniform: that their presence is unwelcome, their service is questioned, and violence against them can be rationalized by those who refuse to accept change." Reeves paused, letting her words hang in the air. "The government recommends maximum punishment, reduction to E1, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, confinement for 2 years, and dishonorable discharge. Nothing less sends an appropriate message that this conduct will not be tolerated at any level, regardless of rank or years of service." The sentencing panel deliberated for 2 hours and 17 minutes. The waiting was excruciating. Outside the courtroom, reporters speculated about the outcome. Inside, Sarah sat quietly, surrounded by her teammates and Commander Vasquez, trying to maintain the composure that had served her throughout this ordeal. When the panel finally returned, the courtroom fell into absolute silence. The senior member, Marine Colonel David Chen, again, no relation to Sarah, though the coincidence felt almost cosmic, stood with the sentencing document in hand. Judge Morrison addressed him formally. "Colonel Chen, has the panel reached a sentence?" "We have, Your Honor." "Please announce the sentence." Colonel Chen's voice was clear and unwavering, each word landing like a gavel strike. "It is the sentence of this court-martial that Master Chief Jake Brennan be reduced to the rank of private, E1, effective immediately." Brennan's shoulders sagged, the loss of 30 years of promotions and achievement contained in that single phrase. That he forfeit all pay and allowances. His pension, his retirement, his financial security gone. That he be confined for a period of 18 months. Brennan closed his eyes, his hands gripping the edge of the defense table until his knuckles went white. And that upon completion of his confinement, he be discharged from the United States Marine Corps with a dishonorable discharge. The final blow, a dishonorable discharge, the military's most severe administrative punishment, a permanent mark that would follow Brennan for the rest of his life, affecting employment, veterans' benefits, and his standing in society. It was the formal declaration that his service, despite 3 decades of it, had ended in disgrace. Judge Morrison accepted the sentencing document and addressed Brennan directly. "Private Brennan, you have the right to appeal this conviction and sentence. The convening authority will provide you with information regarding your appellate rights. This court-martial is adjourned." The gavel fell with a sound that echoed through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. As military police moved to escort Brennan from the courtroom, he paused at the defense table, his hands trembling as he removed the service ribbons from his uniform. The rows of medals that had told the story of his career, combat ribbons, meritorious service awards, good conduct medals, came off one by one and were placed in a small plastic bag. The Master Chief anchors on his collar were removed next, leaving only bare fabric where rank insignia had been displayed for decades. He was no longer Master Chief Brennan. He was Private Brennan, the lowest rank in the military, stripped of everything he'd spent a lifetime building. As the MPs led him away, Brennan looked once more at Sarah. She met his gaze steadily, her face showing neither triumph nor pity, only the quiet resolution of someone who'd seen justice done. The courtroom began to empty, but outside, Captain Torres was already addressing the assembled media. Dozens of cameras and microphones captured her statement. "Today's verdict and sentence send an unequivocal message," Torres stated, her voice carrying the authority of command. "The United States military has zero tolerance for assault, harassment, or discrimination. It doesn't matter what rank you hold. It doesn't matter how many years you've served. If you raise your hand against a fellow service member, if you create a hostile environment based on gender or any other protected characteristic, you will face the full consequences of military justice." A reporter called out, "Captain, what does this case say about the military's commitment to women in combat roles?" Torres didn't hesitate. "It says that women have earned their place through the same rigorous standards as their male counterparts. It says that merit, not gender, determines a warrior's worth. And it says that we will protect every service member's right to serve with dignity and respect." Lieutenant Commander Chen exemplified everything we value in our military: courage, professionalism, and restraint under fire. The fact that she had to defend herself against assault from a fellow service member is unacceptable, and today's verdict makes clear that such conduct will be punished to the fullest extent. Inside the courtroom, Sarah stood with her teammates, processing the weight of what had just occurred. Major Reeves approached, extending her hand. "Lieutenant Commander, justice was served today. Not just for you, but for every woman who's faced this kind of hostility and harassment. You handled yourself with incredible grace throughout this entire process." "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah replied. "I just wanted the system to work the way it's supposed to." "It did," Reeves said, "because you had the courage to stand up, and because leaders like Captain Torres refused to let this be swept under the rug. That's how change happens." As Sarah walked out of the courtroom, she was met with applause from the dozens of service members who'd attended the trial. Women in Navy, Marine Corps, Army, and Air Force uniforms lined the hallway, many with tears streaming down their faces. A young female Marine private approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, thank you for not backing down, for showing us that the system can work." Sarah placed a hand on the private's shoulder. "Keep serving with honor. That's all any of us can do." Outside, the California sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah stood for a moment, breathing in the evening air, feeling the weight of the past 3 weeks finally beginning to lift. Justice had been served. And tomorrow, she would return to doing what she'd always done, serving her country with honor, proving through her actions that she belonged exactly where she was. 4 months later, the sun rose over Naval Base Coronado with the same brilliant intensity it had on that fateful October day. But everything else had changed. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the demonstration field, watching as 2,000 troops assembled once again for the Joint Forces Capability Demonstration. The postponed event had finally been rescheduled, and the anticipation crackling through the air felt different this time, charged not just with inter-service rivalry and professional pride, but with something deeper, a sense of vindication, of progress, of barriers broken and new standards set. Sarah's SEAL team gathered around her for final equipment checks. Lieutenant Morrison adjusted his tactical vest. Chief Petty Officer Doc Washington tested his communications gear, and Petty Officer Rodriguez reviewed the hostage rescue scenario one last time. They moved with the fluid efficiency of operators who'd trained together through countless missions, their trust in each other absolute. "Ready to show them how it's done, boss?" Rodriguez asked with a grin. Sarah smiled, touching the new oak leaf insignia on her collar, the rank of lieutenant commander that had been pinned there in a ceremony attended by Captain Torres, Commander Vasquez, and what seemed like half the base. The promotion had been in the pipeline before the assault, but its timing carried symbolic weight that wasn't lost on anyone. "Let's make it count," Sarah replied. The morning began with opening remarks from Vice Admiral Patricia Hawkins, who traveled from Naval Special Warfare Command specifically for this event. A pioneer herself, one of the first female admirals in Naval Special Warfare, Hawkins stood at the podium with unmistakable authority. "4 months ago, something happened on this base that shocked our community," Hawkins began, her voice carrying across the assembled formation. "An act of violence that violated everything we stand for. But what followed that dark moment was something that should make every service member proud. We saw our military justice system work exactly as it should. We saw leaders at every level refuse to tolerate misconduct. We saw courage from a young SEAL officer who stood her ground and trusted the system. And we saw accountability, real, meaningful consequences that sent a clear message about our values." She paused, scanning the crowd. "Today's demonstration isn't just about showcasing our tactical capabilities. It's about demonstrating our commitment to a military where everyone who meets the standards, regardless of gender, race, or background, belongs and is valued. Lieutenant Commander Chen and her team will show you what a Navy SEAL looks like. Watch carefully. This is the future of our military." The demonstrations began with the Army Rangers executing a rapid deployment insertion, followed by Marine Raiders performing an amphibious assault that drew enthusiastic applause. The Air Force Pararescue Team showcased their combat search and rescue capabilities with precision that bordered on artistic. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the field, "please direct your attention to the hostage rescue demonstration by SEAL Team 7, led by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen." The crowd erupted in applause before the demonstration even began. Sarah felt the weight of 2,000 pairs of eyes on her team as they moved into position. The scenario was complex, a simulated terrorist compound with multiple hostile forces and 2 hostages requiring extraction under fire. The demonstration unfolded with the choreographed precision of a symphony and the brutal efficiency of combat operators doing what they did best. Sarah's team breached the compound using explosive charges that sent Chinese letter W of VES across the field. They moved through the structure in perfect formation, their communication seamless, their movements synchronized. Sarah led the assault element, her M4 rifle tracking targets with the muscle memory of thousands of training repetitions. The blank rounds fired for demonstration purposes cracked through the air as her team engaged simulated enemies. Doc Washington secured the first hostage, a role-playing airman who acted appropriately terrified. Rodriguez cleared the second room with textbook precision. The entire operation, from breach to hostage extraction to exfiltration under covering fire, took 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When Sarah's team emerged from the compound with both hostages secured and no friendly casualties, the assembled troops rose as one in a thunderous standing ovation that seemed to shake the very ground. Sarah and her team stood at attention acknowledging the applause with professional bearing. But inside, Sarah felt something shift, a weight she hadn't fully realized she'd been carrying finally lifting. This wasn't just applause for a well-executed demonstration. This was recognition, acceptance, validation that she and every woman in uniform belonged exactly where they were. Captain Torres approached to congratulate the team personally, but she had one more announcement. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, if you would join me at the podium." Sarah followed, uncertain what was coming. Torres gestured for her to stand beside her as she addressed the crowd. 4 months ago, Lieutenant Commander Chen faced a situation no service member should ever face: assault by a fellow warrior. She could have responded with anger, with bitterness, with a loss of faith in the institution she serves. Instead, she showed us the true meaning of military bearing. She trusted the system. She cooperated fully with the investigation. She testified with dignity and professionalism. And through it all, she continued to serve with excellence. Torres opened a presentation case, revealing a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, for exceptional professionalism, courage, and dedication to duty in the face of unprecedented circumstances, and for exemplifying the highest standards of military service, it is my honor to present you with the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. As Torres pinned the medal to Sarah's uniform, the applause reached deafening levels. Sarah stood at attention, her eyes forward, but she could see in her peripheral vision the sea of faces, men and women from every branch, many with tears streaming down their cheeks, all united in recognition of what this moment meant. The ceremony concluded, but the impact of the day was just beginning to ripple outward. Within weeks, the Navy announced new mandatory training on respect, inclusion, and bystander intervention for all commands. The training used case studies, including the Brennan incident, with names redacted but facts preserved, to illustrate the consequences of harassment and the importance of speaking up. The 3 women who'd previously filed complaints against Brennan came forward publicly, their stories finally heard and validated. Their testimony led to an investigation of the commands that had buried their complaints, resulting in administrative action against 2 commanding officers who'd failed in their duty to address harassment. Sarah became an unlikely spokesperson for change, invited to speak at military academies and leadership courses. She never sought the attention, but she recognized the platform's value. At the Naval Academy, she addressed a class of midshipmen, many of them women preparing for their own battles against prejudice and doubt. "Here's what I learned," Sarah told them, her voice steady and clear. "Excellence is the best response to those who doubt you. Professionalism is the best response to those who disrespect you. And trust in your teammates, trust in the system, trust in the values we all swear to uphold. That's what sustains you when everything else fails." A midshipman raised her hand. "Ma'am, were you ever afraid during the investigation, afraid that the system wouldn't work?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Yes, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried. I'd seen too many cases where complaints disappeared, where victims were quietly transferred or pushed out rather than see justice done. But I also knew that silence would only perpetuate the problem. Speaking up was risky, but staying silent was worse, not just for me, but for every woman who would come after me." The months passed, and Sarah continued her service with the same dedication she'd always shown. She deployed again, this time to East Africa on a counter-terrorism mission that tested every skill she possessed. She mentored young female sailors aspiring to Bud S, sharing both the brutal realities of the training and the incomparable rewards of earning the Trident. She kept in touch with Commander Vasquez, who'd been selected for promotion to captain an assignment as commanding officer of a destroyer. They'd sometimes meet for coffee, 2 women who'd navigated their own paths through a male-dominated institution, comparing notes and celebrating victories both small and large. "Did you hear?" Vasquez asked during one such meeting. "Bud S Class 389 just graduated. 4 women in the class, all 4 made it through. First time that's ever happened. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. That's incredible. They're calling them the Chen effect, Vasquez said with a smile. Your example showed them it was possible. Your case showed them the institution would back them if they proved themselves. 1 year after the assault, Sarah received an unexpected letter. It was from Private Jake Brennan, forwarded through official channels from the military prison where he was serving his sentence. She almost threw it away unopened, but something made her break the seal. The letter was handwritten, the script shaky but legible. Lieutenant Commander Chen, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I've spent every day of the past year thinking about what I did and who I was. I've completed every rehabilitation program the prison offers. I've read books on leadership, on bias, on the changing military. I've listened to the stories of the women in my treatment group who have faced harassment and assault. I destroyed my own career, but worse, I hurt you and sent a message to countless other women that they weren't welcome. I can never undo that, but I can learn from it. When I'm released, I'll never serve in uniform again, but I hope to volunteer with organizations that support veterans dealing with anger, prejudice, and the inability to adapt to change. Maybe I can prevent someone else from making my mistakes. You showed more honor in one moment than I did in 30 years. Thank you for that lesson, even though you never asked to teach it. Respectfully, Jake Brennan. Sarah read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't write back. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. But she felt something in that moment. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that change, however painful, was possible for anyone willing to do the hard work. 2 years after the incident, Sarah stood before a different kind of audience, a graduating class of women at a civilian university who'd invited her to speak about leadership and resilience. As she looked out at their faces, full of hope and determination, and the uncertainty that comes with stepping into an unknown future, she thought about her own journey. The military taught me many things, Sarah told them. But the most important lesson came not from training, not from deployment, but from standing my ground when someone tried to tell me I didn't belong. You will face moments when people question your worth, your capabilities, your right to be in the room. In those moments, remember this: you don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. You only need your own excellence, your own integrity, and your own courage to stand firm. She paused, scanning the crowd. And when you stand firm, when you refuse to be diminished, you don't just change your own future. You change the future for everyone who comes after you. That's not just service to yourself. That's service to something greater. And that's worth every challenge, every obstacle, every person who tells you no. The applause that followed was deafening, but Sarah barely heard it. She was thinking about the young women who'd watch the video of this speech, who'd read the articles about her case, who'd decide because of her example to pursue their own dreams despite the obstacles. She was thinking about the military that was slowly, painfully, but inevitably changing, becoming more inclusive, more accountable, more aligned with the values it claimed to represent. And she was thinking about tomorrow's mission, the next training evolution, the ongoing work of being a Navy SEAL, work that had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with excellence, dedication, and the unwavering commitment to serve. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen walked off that stage knowing her story wasn't really about one assault, one trial, one sentence. It was about progress. And progress, she'd learned, never stopped moving forward. The end.